the devastating effects of such crime on the security and development of countries, as well as on democracy and on people's lives. It's fundamental for our governments to act together and to coordinate public policies, strategies, and operational capacity to curb financial crime, drugs trafficking, trafficking in persons and in weapons, which all affect our countries. Security is currently the main concern of the majority of people in Chile, but also in the whole of Latin America. And states cannot surrender to nor normalize violence and organized crime. Standing steadfast against crime, steadfast against corruption, tireless in building communities and social cohesion in our societies. Chile is also committed to developing regulations to channel the progress of artificial intelligence ethically, transparently, and responsibly. Such a development should respect human rights but protect personal data and promote the integrity of information and its use in the digital era. Today, and I'm sure that many of you already have AI apps on your smartphones, today, artificial intelligence reproduces prejudices and stereotypes as a result of reinforced existing biases from the databases that they use. Should we trust that these large companies simply regulate themselves? History has taught us that this doesn't work. The international community must look after the weakest who are being excluded from this new world and ensure that they can be involved in it. If we don't act now, for instance, by demanding traceability in algorithms, data audits, and corrective human interventions, we might in a few years see a new form of extermination, digital extermination, of non-hegemonic cultures. This would lead to the loss of the valuable diversity of humanity. Let's not allow this to happen. Artificial intelligence and new technologies can represent a tremendous contribution to the world. Today, it's worth remembering the zeroth law of Asimov's laws of robotics, which in literature the last century already forced us to establish that a robot cannot harm humanity or, through inaction, allow humanity to come to harm. And finally, I'm obliged to call your attention to the greatest challenge that we face as a generation, the climate emergency. Protecting and sustaining life on Earth is something that we need to do now. And I'm saying this from Chile, a country that has been affected by drought, floods, and fires that are increasingly frequent. But here, borders are irrelevant, as you're well aware, because we're all affected equally by, for instance, Cyclone Idai, which just a couple of years ago flattened Malawi and Mozambique. We also see fires in Australia, floods in Bangladesh, the dry corridor in Central America, rising sea levels affecting the Maldives, and fires that are currently raging in Cordoba, Argentina. Let's not deny science. Let's not deny our responsibility as humanity over this crisis. In Chile, we are playing our part. We're changing our energy matrix. We're leaving aside fossil fuels, moving towards carbon neutrality, protecting our seas and our woodland. We are also preserving the Antarctic. Chile is an Antarctic country and will continue to be so. We have ratified the Oceanic Governance Treaty, the BBNJ Treaty, and I invite all countries to join it. And further, to support Chile's position in particular of Valparaiso as the headquarters for the treaty that I just mentioned. In light of the scale of the challenges that we face, isolated efforts are not enough. We need all of us, particularly the big powers and those that benefit from the indiscriminate exploitation of natural resources around the planet and have done for decades to shoulder their responsibility and to support with resources, not just good intentions, those who are left behind today. We can't forget that many of the countries that are developed today are so developed specifically because they plundered the wealth of other peoples for all too long and did so facing impunity. We face many challenges, but our fate is not set in stone. I therefore hope, and I'm optimistic when I look towards our shared future. It falls to us to build a fairer and more dignified world for all of us and for future generations. A few weeks ago, Elvira Hernandez became the second female Chilean poet to obtain the National Literature Prize since Gabriela Mistral, who has a Nobel Prize for Literature. And here I would like to paraphrase a warning contained in one of her poems. We are migratory birds, but we've become used to behaving as monuments. Let's not turn multilateralism and the United Nations into a monument, a sterile, static monument. Let us turn this great historic achievement, born out of the Second World War, into a renewed bright light for 2024. To be able to improve the quality of life of whole of humanity. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Chile. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Edgar Rinkēvičs, President of the Republic of Latvia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First of all, I wish to congratulate His Excellency Philmon Yang of Cameroon on assuming the post of President of the General Assembly. I assure you of Latvia's full cooperation along the way. This year's debate is of utmost importance. It focuses on today's interlinked global challenges. It emphasizes the need for a comprehensive approach that is firmly rooted in the United Nations Charter. Allow me to highlight a few points. The future of the multilateral system and rules-based order is in all our hands. We shall not allow selective application or disregard of global norms. The alternative is a terrifying world where force prevails and law perishes. It is already the third year of Russia's unprovoked, full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. Russia is still testing the global community's resilience and commitment to the rules-based order. This war gravely affects the stability of the region and beyond. It has far-reaching consequences for the principles that uphold sovereignty, territorial integrity, and international law. We must ensure that the global order remains resilient in the face of aggression, especially when the aggressor is a nuclear weapon state and a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Russia tries to tear down what has been built by all of us. Russia tries to rearrange the international system that only benefit aggressors. Having endured 50 years of Soviet occupation, Latvia deeply understands the value of freedom and independence, as do many other countries represented in this room. Latvia stands by Ukraine. We continue to call for an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of all Russian troops and military equipment from the entire territory of Ukraine. There can be no compromise regarding Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia's unprovoked attack has widespread consequences beyond Ukraine's borders. It impacts global food security, nuclear safety, and humanitarian situation. Ladies and gentlemen, access to food is a human right. Hunger must never be used as a political tool. Latvia stands in solidarity with countries most affected by food crisis. Latvia has supported grain initiatives and released fertilizer cargoes. We implement partnerships for safe and responsible food production in Africa and Central Asia. Children's rights are human rights. Forcible deportations and illegal adoptions of Ukrainian children to Russia are of serious concern. We call on the United Nations to take a more active stand on this. We will contribute to the return of Ukrainian children and their recovery to the best of our ability. Right to life, liberty, and security is also a human right. Russia continues to deliberately target civilian and critical infrastructure. Its brutal attacks are supported by Belarus, Iran, and North Korea. In response, we are determined to help Ukraine in its fight and to rebuild what has been brutally destroyed. I call on all members of the United Nations to support and join the communiqué adopted at the Peace Summit in Switzerland, to start building a peace process based on the United Nations Charter principles. Russia must bear full legal and financial responsibility for its aggression. We must spare no effort to ensure comprehensive accountability for all crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine. It is crucial to support and strengthen institutions that investigate and prosecute these crimes, provide justice for victims, and uphold the rule of law. Establishment of a special tribunal that would be able to prosecute the main perpetrators of the crime of aggression would ensure full accountability. I encourage other countries to support this proposal. Distinguished delegates, our attention remains focused on the crisis in the Middle East. Tragically, innocent civilians, including countless children, bear the brunt of this crisis. It is imperative for the international community, the United Nations, to support efforts that ensure the protection of all civilians and work towards a durable resolution. Latvia, together with other European Union member states, has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the unconditional release of all hostages, and the provision of humanitarian access at scale. It is crucial to prevent the deepening of the crisis and avoid regional spillover. We remain hopeful that progress towards ending hostilities can soon be achieved. We condemn all terrorist attacks against Israel. We recognize Israel's legitimate right to self-defense, and it must be exercised in line with international law, and particularly international humanitarian law, the law that has been put in place to protect all civilians. We must also focus on revitalizing the political process, to break the cycle of violence, to strive for a just and lasting peace. Peace that addresses the legitimate aspirations and security concerns of both Israelis and Palestinians. The ongoing escalation reinforces the necessity of pursuing a two-state solution in accordance with international parameters. Mr. President, the United Nations is a place where no country's voice can be dimmed by more resourceful powers. The United Nations commitment to principles of peace and security, justice and human rights empowers us to address challenges that otherwise cannot be tackled alone. Acting in solidarity for sustainable and inclusive development is more acute than ever before. The Summit of the Future has demonstrated our renewed commitment to sustainable development goals. It accelerates the efforts to eradicate poverty, reduce inequalities, and ensure environmental sustainability. The right path towards progress and achieving sustainable development goals is to advance in innovation, science-based and environmentally friendly economy, to enhance the quality of education and strengthen governance, to engage with women, youth, and non-governmental sector on these matters. Latvia has already progressed towards achieving 63% of the set targets. We are also helping those most in need. Latvia's development cooperation policy has become more global and more tangible, increasing year by year. There can be no sustainable development without peace and consistent global action on climate change. The ongoing conflicts and crises around the world aggravate the effects of climate change. We strongly believe that the United Nations Security Council must address climate change as an existing risk for global peace and security. Small island developing states are at the forefront of global environmental crisis. Latvia welcomes the recent advisory opinion of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. We closely follow the International Law Commission's deliberations aimed at clarifying the impact of sea level rise on statehood. Latvia has meaningful experience in building resilience against disinformation and promoting media literacy. We support an online environment that is free and open, but also safe and secure. The rising capabilities of artificial intelligence provide a lot of opportunities for growth and development. However, misuse of these capabilities is a concern. Latvia also remains increasingly engaged in peacebuilding and prevention, but in words and in deeds. That includes continuous voluntary financial support and participation in United Nations peacekeeping missions, as well as support to women, peace and security agenda. Distinguished delegates, the United Nations is not without its flaws. Its potential to prevent aggression or resolve conflicts has frequently been questioned. We must acknowledge the shortcomings and effectively address them. Latvia strongly supports revitalization of the United Nations system and reform of the United Nations Security Council. The number of permanent members of the Security Council must be expanded. It must be expanded to make it more effective, inclusive, and accountable. It must be expanded to elevate the voice of underrepresented regions. It is high time for Africa to have permanent presence at the Security Council table. Africa has been neglected for far too long, and that has to be changed. Also, the small island developing states deserve a non-permanent seat. Their voices must be heard, especially given the existential threats they are facing. The decision-making process should be revisited as well. No single state should have veto power in the United Nations Security Council. Especially when it comes to conflicts, the permanent members are involved themselves. This is the way to ensure that the permanent members of the Security Council uphold their responsibility to protect peace and security. Dear friends, the United Nations once used to be a beacon of hope for the people. Not anymore. We must change that. We must rebuild trust and common values. And we can do that only by working together. Latvia is fully prepared to shoulder its part of the responsibility. For the first time, Latvia is running for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council at the 2025 elections. We stand ready to re-energize this international body. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Latvia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Santiago Pena Palacios, President of the Republic of Paraguay. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Señor Presidente de la Asamblea.
President of the General Assembly, distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished ministers of foreign affairs, ladies and gentlemen. We live in a troubled, volatile world which is experiencing extremely difficult, unprecedented days and tremendous challenges, armed conflicts, tensions in every corner of the globe, crises of multilateral institutions and of the international system, attacks on the values of democracy by the twin threats of populism and authoritarianism, the risks of cyber security and the misuse of artificial intelligence, brutal inequity in the distribution of wealth, climate change, which is jeopardizing our very existence. These are just some of the immense problems that we face. I'm therefore afraid that I'm not here today to give a heartwarming speech, rather one that might generate discomfort and concern in light of what is happening. I think that we need to be sincere and admit that we are all failing to build a better world. Because if there is a right time and place to debate and propose crucial decisions that will change the direction of mankind, it's here, the United Nations General Assembly. And due to the delicate juncture in which we're living, we are forced to do that. The good news is that not all is lost, because as a great military hero and then a statistician of my country said, his name was Bernardino Caballero, he said, the future is the child of the president. This means that we can have a better future if we act today and here. Even with disappointments, we can beat down many spirits. We can contemplate the bright horizons of the future, but always and when, as Caballero added, when we are worthy of respect and the estimation of future generations. This is only if we are worthy of taking up the lofty roles that we have. Rather than hiding problems under the carpet, we attack them clearly, firmly, and bravely. Despite the hard reality that we face, I continue to be optimistic. I don't fear the future, because I trust in the capacity of mankind to overcome challenges. But it is imperative, I think even obligatory, to abolish the issues in multilateralism and push through changes such as abolishing the veto in the UN Security Council. We need to build frameworks that promote equitable and sustainable development in which all countries, regardless of their size or their power, can benefit equally from global progress. Only in this way we will be able to meet the promises represented by this forum and make us worthy of the respect and esteem of future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, the maintenance of peace should be the fundamental pillar of multilateralism. However, today's reality shows a sad outlook. Around 20 international armed conflict, and more than 110 domestic armed conflicts are active around the world. This shows us that the institutions that were established to preserve peace have not been able to meet their aims. War continues to be a scourge that is scattered across humanity. This scourge tears the social fabric, annihilating communities and leaving a legacy of suffering that is incalculable in scale. Every lost life is a testimony to our collective failure to meet the most basic of our responsibilities, which is to preserve peace and protect human dignity. My nation's history is a living testimony to the cruelty and immense suffering of wars. With the War of the Triple Alliance, Paraguay experienced this extermination, which sadly caused 3 of the genocides of the 20th century. As another great Paraguayan, Manuel Gondra, said, Paraguay is a small but proud country, and that's the only reason we were able to survive this cruel war. However, it is also a country that knows the price to pay knows that the price that can be paid through a conflict is very large. For this reason, Paraguay best understands that not only the calamity of war, but also what it means for a small country to be invaded or attacked by more powerful powers. That's why we express our most sincere solidarity with the victims of all armed conflicts, be they domestic or international in nature. We reaffirm our steadfast, decisive commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes, and we advocate without exception for the non-use of force as a means of resolving disagreements between nations and peoples. In this context, we reiterate our firm support for Ukraine, respecting their sovereignty and territorial integrity. We underscore the urgent need to find diplomatic solutions that lead to fair, comprehensive, lasting peace, with the aim of bringing an end to this conflict and ensuring stability in the region. Just as in the case of Ukraine, we believe that conflicts must be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy, always through a quest for solutions that respect the fundamental rights of all involved parties. This belief also guides our position on the increasing crisis in the Middle East. Our relations with the State of Israel are underpinned by solid pillars such as faith and hope. This is why Paraguay was one of the countries which has stood most firm alongside Israel since the gross, heinous terrorist attacks of Hamas on the 7th of October 2023. Paraguay today reaffirms its recognition of the legitimate right of Israel to defend itself. We also reject any attempt to assign in a biased manner responsibility between the democratically elected authorities of Israel and the leaders of the terrorist group Hamas. At the same time, we issue an urgent appeal for the implementation of a solution that alleviates the humanitarian situation, brings an end to the violence, and guarantees the immediate release of the hostages, promoting constructive dialogue which would lead to lasting peace. We must continue to speak up about our deep-rooted concern at the situation in Africa. Here, UNHCR estimates that there are currently around 25 active conflicts, some long-standing and others emerging, but all with devastating consequences for the lives and the futures of the inhabitants of that continent. We aspire to see a return to peace and stability in that region. Enough violence, enough wars, but also enough mere words. As actors on the international stage, we must take firm and effective action. Today, I would also like to, as an aside, mention the hard situation in Haiti. This is a clear example of the shortcomings of multilateralism. Despite international efforts and interventions, attempts for global cooperation haven't led to peace, governance, and sustainable security that the Haitian people so needs and warrants. Today, gangs control a large part of Port-au-Prince, submerging the country into a spiral of violence that multilateral mechanisms have not been able to de-escalate effectively. Added to this situation, we see a catastrophic humanitarian reality. More than 5 million Haitians are suffering from food insecurity, and we see the re-emergence of illnesses such as cholera. Although multiple promises of aid have been made, the lack of financial resources and logistical difficulties have stopped humanitarian assistance arriving in a timely and opportune manner, there is a worrisome dissonance between what the international community promises and what really happens on the ground. We will stand alongside the Haitian people in every step towards helping this brother country. My country, as many other countries have done here, have passed through authoritarianism and dictatorships. For this reason, today Paraguayans value the ideals of democracy and the rule of law more than ever. Paraguayans can talk with their own experience. Our country lived through the shadow of dictatorship, banishment and exile for a long time. Today, however, our reality is different. Paraguay is reaffirming its democratic vocation through free elections, transparent elections, and it has done for more than 3 decades. Never before have we had so many years of democracy, and I'm pleased to be able to say, against the doomsayers and pessimists, that we have seen the happiest lives in my homeland. Perhaps Paraguayans don't agree on everything, but we can agree that there are no better ways to live together than through democracy and the rule of law. Democracy is simply innegotiable. For this reason, I must condemn today, loudly and strongly, what is happening to our Venezuelan brothers. I would like to reiterate Paraguay's position as to the electoral process in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, which culminated on the 28th of July this year. This process overlooked the will of the Venezuelan people and was characterized by serious acts by the regime, which led to persecution of the main opposition actors and to arbitrary detentions. The deterioration of democracy in Venezuela is clear to see, such as are the systematic violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Added to that, we see action contrary to international law, particularly in diplomatic relations and the right to asylum. We reiterate our support for the democratic forces in Venezuela that are fighting authoritarianism for the return to a truly democratic system that is not merely a facade. One of the most important criticisms of global multilateralism is the idea one of the most important ideas behind multilateralism is the idea that all are treated on an equal footing. The concept of a vote for each nation often becomes a vacuous concept if nations are not obliged to transact their self-determination in order to not be left out of great international markets. However, we recognize that regional cooperation continues to be a crucial path towards physical and economic integration. The fight against the challenges that we face is impossible without convergence of wills from neighboring countries. Regional cooperation is the only way that we are able to work together to design national policies together with other nations. And it is through this spirit of cooperation and strengthening regional institutions that Paraguay decided to put forward the candidacy of our Foreign Minister, Ruben Ramirez Lescano, as Secretary General of the Organization of American States. We're convinced that his leadership will contribute significantly to revitalizing the OAS, promoting more inclusive and efficient multilateralism that meets the challenges of the present and focuses on the well-being of all peoples in our hemisphere. In the context of our commitment to the most inclusive form of multilateralism that leaves no nation behind, Paraguay reiterates its unwavering commitment towards those countries that, despite their outstanding contribution, are excluded from important international fora such as these. Paraguay not only recognizes but also profoundly values international cooperation with the Republic of China, Taiwan. This is a kindred nation with which we have for now more than 70 years forged robust and meaningful friendship. This friendship is based on the shared values of democracy, the rule of law, and free trade. It's a genuine friendship forged through the adversity of two geographically small countries living alongside great powers. Our combative spirit, however, is everything but small. In this assembly, we renew our firm support for Taiwan to be a full part of the United Nations. We believe that their exclusion is an injustice that we can't overlook, because the values that we share and their contribution to the international community should be recognized. If there is a country that today should be a part of the United Nations and is not yet so, that is Taiwan. Today, we've not only come to speak up about this injustice, but also to speak up firmly to alert the international community as to the threat to their integrity and the legitimate rights of self-determination of their peoples. I underscore the importance of peace and stability in the Straits, Taiwan Straits, in a world full of tensions in which conflicts constantly threaten to boil over. Positive interactions in this region are not only vital for the Asian security, but also for global stability. For the same reasons, we uphold the principles of peace, justice, and international cooperation in all corners of the world, and it's important that we reaffirm our commitment to these values within our borders. In my country, as I was saying earlier, we have a vibrant and full democracy. We have a republican system that balance of powers, and while we have a political majority in the Congress, we continue to have dialogue with our opposition to carry out the great reforms that our country needs. We're convinced that democracy cannot be a vacuum. It should have content and, above all, results. Here, economic development is crucial to ensure the future strength of democracy. Prosperity, indeed, is the biggest enemy of crime, of division, of a lack of hope. Social policy, the most effective of social policy, I always say, is economic prosperity. But to ensure that this prosperity reaches everyone, we need to invest in human capital and generate the right conditions for families to be able to work. And here I'd like to cite two of the programs of my government. Firstly, Zero Hunger in Schools. This aims to completely eradicate hunger in school-age children, because we believe that children who are hungry cannot learn. And we also have the Che Rogapora program, which is the first policy giving access to housing focused on the working class. It will allow thousands of Paraguayan families to transform a monthly income into a monthly payment into a family asset. If we don't have development, we have no security. This is a national level view and an international one, and we understand the cooperation with different national and international agencies. This is our vision as the President of the Republic. Finally, we will continue to support institutions and transparency as fundamental preconditions for development. The recent obtention of investment grade by Paraguay is a clear reflection of our constant efforts to strengthen our institutions. Added to that, we have a long-standing economic stability that has been consolidated over the years. Dear friends, Paraguay wants to, can, and will be a true protagonist on the global stage. We are determined to play our role. Paraguay is a country that has abundant natural resources, valuable human capital, and has a clear approach in creating value chains that promote the green economy based on the development of sustainable technology. Our country is a beacon in the production of clean and renewable energy. Hydroelectric energy generation is not only a national project, but rather a joint initiative with our neighbours, which seeks to ensure a more developed, sustainable and emissions-free world. I firmly believe that Paraguay is an example of how economic development is entirely compatible with environmental sustainability. Paraguay shares common challenges with other landlocked countries, which will be addressed in the new Programme of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries, which will be adopted in Botswana this December. Far from giving up hope, we see in these challenges great opportunity. We are transforming our difficulties into strength, harnessing our geographic location as a strategic asset. Our position in the heart of South America means that we can be the motor of South American integration. We have a clear vision, and we are becoming a logistics center through the hydro corridor Paraguay-Paraná and the bioceanic corridor in the South America. These are key to revitalizing and boosting Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance. As we consolidate our geographic position, it is crucial that this vision of growth is supported by strong investment in education. Paraguay's success will depend on our ability to prepare future generations for the globalized and competitive world. Together with education, technology is a key tool to ensure development and social inclusion. Our nations face many challenges, but without doubt, one of the greatest is the issue of the ethical use of artificial intelligence and the progress in technology in general. Maudsley posits exponential growth in the development of new technologies. This calls for the creation of new regulatory schemes that protect people able to face challenges that are approaching at all too fast a pace. These new techniques, such as sandboxes or co-regulation, should ultimately aim at ensuring responsible use of emerging technologies and equity in how they are applied. In Paraguay, we are profoundly committed to preserving our cultural heritage. At the end of this year, we will be hosting the 19th session of the Intergovernmental Committee for Safeguarding Cultural Heritage of UNESCO, and we hope that Guarania will be recognized as immaterial cultural heritage. Further, we reaffirm our commitment to the protection of fundamental rights of all citizens, the family and human life from conception. We defend the traditional values that have made our nation so great. Despite having looked at things critically, I would like to confess that I am an incurable optimist. I believe that our future is brilliant and full of opportunities, hence why I see bright horizons on the future. But if we fight for a better present, we will have future days full of light and possibilities. The defense of democratic values and respect for human rights must continue to be our guide. Of course, we will have differences and legitimate policy differences, but there are some principles that cannot be negotiated. That is democracy, the rule of law, unfettered respect for human rights. These are all fundamental pillars. Although our political or ideological views might be different, this shouldn't divide us or stop us from advancing towards building cooperation based on solid foundations. If we continue to forge ahead towards cooperation, mutual respect, integration, fraternity among our peoples, I'm convinced that we will have better days. In conclusion, and despite the tremendous challenges that we face, I'm convinced that, as William Faulkner once said, humanity will not simply endure, it will prevail. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Paraguay. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Tu Lam, State President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Excellency President of the UNGA, Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me first congratulate you, Excellency Philemon Yang, on the election as the President of the 79th session of the UNGA. I trust that this session will be a great success. I also commend Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th session, and Excellency Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, for their contributions and efforts in coordinating UN endeavors to prevent wars, maintain peace, and promote global development cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is undergoing transformative changes of historic significance. Although peace, cooperation, and development remain the dominant trends, they're facing new and more serious challenges. Strategic competition among major powers is becoming broader, fiercer, and more confrontational. Political disputes conflicts and security environment intensify, survival and development space narrows. Risk of conflict, new hotspots, arms race, tension, confrontation, and direct clashes increase. The rise of power politics, egoistic nationalism, are challenging international law, eroding multilateral institutions, and diminishing faith in global cooperation. The vicious cycle of conflict and violence escalates in various regions, causing immense sufferings to millions of innocent civilians. The risk of a limited nuclear war or even a Third World War has not been ruled out. Non-traditional security challenges such as climate change, extreme weather events, natural disasters, diseases, resource depletion, and aging population are becoming increasingly severe and hindering our efforts for development. Poor countries are being left further behind with a widening development gap. Super Typhoon Yagi, which ravaged Vietnam and other countries in the region, serves as a stark warning of the severe impacts that natural disasters and climate change can have on sustainable development for all. Global food production is sufficient to feed 1.5 times the world population, yet famine is threatening over 780 million people, and 2.4 billion people endure food insecurity. Defense expenditure reached a record of $2.4 trillion in US dollars in 2023, yet we struggled to pull $100 billion US dollars for climate actions. With only a third of the SDGs timeline remaining, 80% of the targets may not be met. Global economic growth faces difficulties, and decoupling and fragmentation, along with economic pressures and sanctions, threaten rapid and sustainable development. The fourth industrial revolution offers opportunities for quantum progress, but it also poses security and safety challenges for society and individuals. These unprecedented challenges to peace, cooperation, sustainable development, and human dignity affect this generation and the next. They compel us to unite, act, and work together, upholding the role of international institutions, foremost among them the United Nations, regional organizations including ASEAN, to achieve the ultimate goal of ending war, abolishing all forms of oppression, exploitation, building peace, and creating a better world to bring happiness to all mankind. In that spirit, I would like to share Vietnam's vision for a more peaceful, stable, cooperative, prosperous, and sustainable future for everyone. First, as peace and stability are the foundation for a prosperous future, we must promote observance of international law and UN Charter by all states, particularly the major powers. Each state must act responsibly, fulfill its commitments, and abide by international law and UN Charter, including fundamental principles such as the peaceful settlement of disputes, non-use of force, sovereign equality, territorial integrity, and respect for the political systems chosen by the people of each nation. States should also contribute to the common work of the international community in line with their capabilities. We must strengthen solidarity, sincerity, and trust among nations, uphold dialogue, eliminate confrontation, and firmly oppose unilateral embargoes and sanctions that contravene international law and UN Charter. Second, we must ensure equitable development for every state, community, and individuals, and recognizing the diverse economic, social, and cultural conditions that they may have. Every resource must be effectively unleashed, marshaled, and utilized for development. According to each country's needs, we must prioritize resources where they're most needed for implementing the SDGs, with attention to assisting developing and less developed countries, especially through preferential loans, transfer of advanced technologies, investment and trade facilitation, and debt relief for poor countries. And third, we should urgently create smart global governance frameworks with long-term vision for science and technology, especially emerging technologies like AI. This will ensure we make progress and enjoy the benefits of these technologies while actively preventing threats to peace, sustainable development, and humanity. In that connection, I welcome the documents adopted at the Summit for the Future, especially the Global Digital Compact. This will serve as a crucial basis for advancing global governance and international cooperation in those areas. And fourth, we should adopt innovative thinking to build a transformative future across all sectors, focusing on digital transformation, green transition, and global governance transformation. Green transition and digital transformation are essential tools for countries, especially developing ones, to build resilience and self-reliance, enabling a timely and active prevention of and response to shocks, crises, and potential disasters. We must also prioritize reforming multilateral mechanisms, especially the UN system, international financial and monetary institutions, to ensure better representation, equity, and transparency. Enhancing the capacity, effectiveness, and future readiness is essential for remaining relevant in our changing world. And fifth, we must place human at the center in delivering on our visions. People should be the center, the goal, and driver of all policies and actions at all levels. And investments should focus on the holistic development of the youth, enriching their knowledge and culture, grounded in shared values and a sense of responsibility and contribution. Vietnam welcomes the UNGA's official decision to grant additional rights and privilege participation to the State of Palestine from this session onwards. Vietnam reaffirms its solidarity with the state and people of Cuba and calls on the United States to lift embargoes and sanctions against Cuba and to remove Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. We need to vigorously promote such actions since they are practical ways to foster equitable development and happiness for all. President Ho Chi Minh, a Vietnamese hero of national liberation and a man of culture, once stressed, unity, unity, great unity, success, success, grand success. Only through unity and cooperation with trust and by thinking and acting as one can we build a world of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for the present and future generations, ensuring no one is left behind. In today's rapidly changing world, each state plays a vital role in the grand orchestration of our era. Vietnam is making every effort to move forward toward a future of peace, stability, prosperity, and sustainability, not only for all our people, but also for all nations worldwide. This is Vietnam's vision, goal, and strong commitments to the international community, today and tomorrow. Thank you for your kind attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the State President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Distinguished Mr. President, Your Excellencies, honorable delegates, I would like to express my sincere congratulations to His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang on his election to the honorable position of President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Poland fully supports your mission, sir, and wishes you every success. I also extend my thanks to His Excellency Mr. Denis Francis for his effective presidency during the previous 78th session. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to address the United Nations General Assembly for the 10th time as the President of Poland. All the more so because today we are facing huge global challenges that require our solidarity, cooperation, and determination. Our presence here reminds us of the mission for the fulfillment of which the United Nations was established after the terrible tragedy of the World War II, to prevent further conflicts and ensure world peace. This year marks the 85th anniversary of the beginning of that massive conflict, the conflict which claimed millions of lives. It was Poland which became its first victim. On September the 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany attacked my homeland, starting World War II. 2 weeks later, on September the 17th, the Soviet Union also invaded my country. As the ally of Nazi Germany fulfilling the agreement between Hitler and Stalin, so-called Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, both aggressors deprived us of our independence. Poland found itself in the midst of the brutal occupation of two totalitarianisms, becoming a witness and victim of war crimes that forever left a mark on our nation's and world's history. In my country, we know very well what war is, and we know what drama and suffering it brings. That is why Poland has always been a strong advocate of measures which aim to preventing conflicts and ensuring peace in the world. Our history and experiences incline us to constantly recall the need to respect international law and protect the sovereignty of states. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are facing yet again an extremely serious threat to global security. For the past 2.5 years, we have seen Russia's brutal aggression against neighboring Ukraine. This is a flagrant violation of fundamental norms of international law, such as the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. This unprovoked aggression is destabilizing the region and posing a direct threat to the global order and security. We cannot allow this war to turn into another frozen conflict. This is the most important task for the future. That is why it's so important today to stop the Russian war in Ukraine, not only to end the suffering of the people and punish the aggressor, but also to prevent such heinous actions from becoming a model for others to follow. Ukraine's territorial integrity must be restored within its internationally recognized borders. The logic of conquest and disregard for international law must be stopped, unless we agree to live in a world where any country can become a victim of aggression regardless of its size and geographic location. Poland is following with equal concern the situation in the Middle East, where due to the brutal Hamas attacks of October the 7th, 2023, the conflict has escalated. Israel, like any other state, has the right to self-defense. However, these actions must follow international humanitarian law. Poland has consistently supported a two-state solution to the Middle East conflict that will guarantee both Palestinians and Israelis the right to live in peace and security in correct relations with all the neighbors. As proponents of the principles of equality and the right of nations to self-determination, we believe that the emergence of an independent Palestine will not contradict Israel's interests, whereas the right of Israel to exist cannot be questioned. The two nations are united by space and time, which will remain their common destiny. The current situation in Yemen is also of deep concern to us. The ongoing humanitarian crisis affects millions of people. and the struggle for control in a country poses a threat to regional security and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. The international community must do everything possible to ease the suffering of Yemeni people and restore stability in their country. And we all see how the ongoing wars, conflicts, and terrorist actions in Africa undermine people's efforts to live and develop in safe and fair conditions. The world must stand with all those affected by insecurity and help them to restore peace through reconciliation and social cohesion. Ladies and gentlemen, peace and security in the world will not be possible to achieve without respect for the law. As President of Poland, I consistently repeat the phrase peace through law, always emphasizing the fundamental role of international law in maintaining global order. Our history, our experiences teach us that only adherence to international norms and the protection of the rights of every human being can ensure stability and development. Poland, as a country of freedom and solidarity, will always demand respect for human rights, regardless of geographic location. Therefore, Poland has decided to apply for a seat on the UN Human Rights Council for 2029-2031. Our candidacy is an expression of our commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights around the world. We believe that human rights are the foundation of peace and security. Their violation leads to conflicts, while their protection results in stability and development. Ladies and gentlemen, Poles perfectly understand the perspective of countries that experienced colonialism. Our history, from losing our statehood in the 18th century to World War II, to the fall of communism, has taught us how precious freedom, sovereignty, and human dignity are. It is a part of our DNA, and therefore we stand together with the developing countries in their quest for prosperity, equal treatment, and self-reliance. That is why Poland will not stop supporting African societies, as I had the opportunity to personally assure my friends during this year's visit to Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania, as well as in recent years during my earlier visits to the continent, which is so important for Poland, Europe, and the whole world in building a common, safer, and more prosperous future. We believe that Africa has the potential to develop its own solution to its challenges. However, we recognize that global development in many parts of the world currently is facing serious obstacles. We note with concern that halfway through the deadline set by Agenda 2030 for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, progress made in realization of its ambitions is still insufficient. During this session, Poland will serve as Vice President of the UN Economic and Social Council. The motto of our mandate in the ECOSOC is Developing in Solidarity, which summarizes well our vision of progress we need. With its presidency of the Council of the European Union starting on January 1st, 2025, Poland will seek to give new impetus to relations with developing partners. There is a need for better cooperation, real partnership, more solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, next year we will celebrate the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Despite its imperfections, The UN remains the foundation of the world order, allowing us to work together for peace, development, and human dignity. We believe that the Summit for the Future has given us an opportunity to reflect on the effectiveness of our work and the possibility of improving the UN structures to make them more responsive to contemporary challenges. Poland is ready to discuss reforms to the Security Council, other key UN bodies, as well as international financial institutions. The world is changing, and our system must change as well in order to better serve the global community. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, our common commitment enshrined in the UN Charter sounds to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Poland will remain faithful to this mission and will support efforts for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. Thank you for your attention, and I wish us all fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Poland. The Assembly will hear an address by His Serene Highness Prince Albert II, Sovereign Prince of Monaco. I request protocol to escort His Serene Highness and invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Heads of State and Government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Almost 80 years ago, the United Nations Charter was born and laid the foundations of our organisation to preserve future generations from the scourge of war. The founders then had a firm conviction that there was no power more legitimate than that we vested collectively in this new international organisation. Over the last 2 days, I have participated, alongside many of you, on the initiative of the Secretary-General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, in the Summit to the Future. Between hope and concern, this summit allowed us to grasp just how much work we still need to do to leave a harmonious and peaceful future to our children. While we are facing an increasing number of challenges, we're currently seeing a multiplication of regional conflicts, an uptick in the arms race and nuclear proliferation, as well as an ebbing of our collective security. Extreme violence and conflicts that are currently raging, and the thousands of victims that they're claiming in the four corners of the world are intolerable. Targeted attacks against civilian infrastructure that don't even spare schools or hospitals are flagrant violations of the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. Similarly, the use of famine as a weapon of war is an odious crime. These acts must not go unpunished. Whatever the conflict or the continent that it is taking place on, international justice must establish the crimes and prosecute those responsible. This is absolutely essential to build a just and lasting peace. The partition of the world that we're seeing currently is very concerning. Now should not be the time for war or division, but rather for building coalitions, for concrete actions, ramping up cooperation, solidarity, helping each other, and engaging in dialogue. My country's conviction has always been that the way of multilateralism is the only way possible. The UN is at the heart of multilateralism, and it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to implement the roadmap that we adopted collectively. As we committed last year at the summit on the SDGs, and yesterday at the Summit of the Future, we must move away from the way of destruction and focus on the way that leads to prosperity. The new agenda for peace is blazing a trail for us to show more solidarity and to establish trust. The milestones that have already been put down, and they are showing us the way to go. The 4th UN Conference on Financing for Development that will take place next year compels us to rethink the international financial architecture and to help countries to undertake more sustainable and inclusive development. The World Social Summit that will also take place next year should give us the necessary driving force for more social justice and to contribute to fighting poverty, which is number 1 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable development as a whole will not be achieved, and it will not achieve the desired results if we do not include women and girls. While we're celebrating in 2025, on the one hand, the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 of the Security Council on Women, Peace and Security, and on the other hand, the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Programme of Action, it must be recalled that gender equality has still not been reached insofar as rights, responsibilities and opportunities. It is only by guaranteeing their rights in all of the SDGs and in the actions of the Pact for the Future that we will be able to achieve more justice and inclusion. Step by step, and whatever the cost, we must hold true to our efforts to promote the rights of women and to ensure gender equality. Mr. President, let us make no mistake. The most threatening challenges for humanity on the long term are, without a doubt, the multi-dimensional environmental crisis that we're going through, and must I recall, we're responsible for that. Climate change, the erosion of biodiversity and ecosystems, as well as the huge amount of pollution that is affecting both the land and the ocean, the cradles of life, are turning upside down the daily lives of millions of people and causing considerable economic loss. We, in the face of this tragedy of the commons, we cannot show any doubt or dejection. We must be clear-headed when it comes to all of the things we must do, and we must be optimistic when it comes to the future. Indeed, we now have several international instruments, major ones, that must guide us when navigating this storm. We have the Paris Agreement, the Global Framework for Biodiversity of Kunming-Montreal, and the BBNJ Agreement, and I hope that a new international agreement will come about as well on plastic pollution in the world. These crises require coordinated response, and when we participate in the different international fora over the next few months, let us bear this in mind and engage in unified and concerted action. In Colombia, first of all, we have the COP16 of the UN Conference on Biodiversity, where we have high hopes to deal with the challenges, to implement the plan for biodiversity and to deliver our 2050 vision, living in harmony with nature. Finally, at the end of the year, at the COP29, we have the UNFCCC conference in Baku, and we will establish a new collective goal for climate financing for developing countries that should be up to the needs and be realistic and operational. Creating the conditions for guaranteeing the right to a future in a healthy environment requires us to put an end to the upheaval of our ecosystems and also to show wisdom and knowledge and draw on the wisdom and knowledge of men and women present on the ground already suffering the consequences. For example, small island developing states that are particularly vulnerable to the consequences of rising sea levels, and they could potentially disappear. We could see a disappearance of habitable and productive lands, and that's a real threat for their existence. The Principality of Monaco and its institutions committed to the preservation of the oceans is supporting the creation of an international panel of experts for ocean sustainability that would be headed by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. In this regard, we call upon all states to ramp up the process to ratify the BBNJ agreement coming into force in 2025, which is an important year for the planet, with France hosting the 3rd UN conference on the oceans in Nice. This conference should enable us to ramp up our actions and to mobilise all stakeholders to provide lasting solutions that we need for the ocean to overcome the challenges we face. The blue economy is also playing a key role, and the Principality intends to collaborate actively by hosting in June 2025 the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. Finally, beyond the framework provided by the BBNJ, I reaffirm the commitment of my country to the implementation of solid regulation grounded in the best scientific data, ensuring effective protection of the marine environment before we see any mineral exploitation of the seabeds. Ultimately, these interconnected crises compel us to completely rethink our relationship with nature, which is essential for our survival and well-being. Mr. President, when it comes to the challenges and changes that humanity is facing, the development of artificial intelligence is unavoidable. The emergence and the rise of this new technology is accompanied by so many opportunities for our daily lives, but it also comes with dangers, and we must deal with these. The Principality of Monaco is committed to seizing the possibilities provided by safe, secure and trustworthy artificial intelligence systems for sustainable development. Indeed, the staggering technological progress that we're seeing can help to increase development, as well as it could provide fertile ground for organised crime and terrorism. So it's incumbent upon the international community now to establish the right regulations imposing ethical use of this technology that respects human rights and fundamental freedoms and ensure that it is not used or diverted for military or terrorist purposes. Further, disinformation today is one of the most insidious dangers for our societies. It is spreading rapidly, fed by social networks and digital platforms, sowing confusion and eroding trust in institutions and media. The consequences of this manipulation of information are grave, and they can include the destabilisation of our states and the exacerbation of international tensions. It is therefore essential to bolster verification mechanisms, fact verification mechanisms, to protect the truth and to preserve the health of our democracies. Mr. President, we have the tools we need, whether they be legal, technological or scientific, to bring lasting and effective solutions to our contemporary challenges. The Pact for the Future and the 80th anniversary of the UN in 2025 offer us up an historic and unique opportunity to make progress in the intergovernmental process to reform the Security Council, to make our organisation more inclusive and representative of current realities in order to resolve the crises that we face. While the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in Paris were a resounding success, the athletes showed us that efforts and perseverance, including in adversity, lead to victory. They gave us a lesson of humility by teaching us that while victory is the ultimate goal, the journey and good competition are equally as important accomplishments. Let us therefore commit together with a sense of determination to the process that we have defined, step by step. Let us overcome the obstacles without ever losing sight of our goal, which is to preserve peace between nations and to guarantee the well-being of the peoples of the United Nations. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Sovereign Prince of Monaco. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency David Renbok Adeg, President and Head of State of the Republic of Nauru. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies and distinguished delegates. As the President of the Republic of Nauru, a small island nation with a vision for a more equitable and sustainable future, I bring you warm greetings from the government and the people of Nauru. In this 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, we gather at a time of unprecedented global challenge and opportunity. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, Nauru remains committed to the principles of sovereignty, self-determination and international cooperation that have guided our collective progress since the UN's founding. Mr. President, as a nation surrounded by the ocean, Nauru has a vested interest in the responsible stewardship of the ocean's marine resources. We have been at the forefront of international efforts to protect and sustainably use the ocean's resources, including developing and adopting the BBNJ agreement and exploring the wealth of the deep seabeds mineral resources in line with our objectives under the 2050 Blue Pacific Strategy. The greatest risk we face is not the potential environmental impacts of mineral recovery, but the risk of inaction. There is a risk of failing to seize the opportunity to transform to renewable energy and to decarbonize our planet. We cannot let fear and misinformation hold us back. Instead, we must use the knowledge we have gathered wisely to ensure that deep-sea mineral recovery, under the principle of the common heritage of mankind, does not compromise the integrity of our marine environment. This is not just an economic opportunity, it is an environmental imperative. We therefore call on the international community not to ignore the science and progress we have made. Instead, we urge you and the International Seabed Authority Council to work with us to establish and adopt robust regulations necessary for the conservation and sustainable use of marine resources. We have the science, we have the technology, and we have the imperative. Let us rise to the challenge and opportunity before us, employing our investments for the good of all, and let the time for action be now. Mr. President, Nauru's story is not one of despair, but of resilience. Our people have thrived for centuries, living in harmony with the land and the sea. Today we adapt, we innovate, and we persevere. We are exploring new frontiers because even as we fight against the effects of climate change, we must also adapt to the reality that is upon us. Through initiatives like the Higher Ground Project, we are reclaiming land, strengthening our infrastructure, and securing our future. Adaptation initiatives to address modern challenges and concerns demand more than technical expertise. They require substantial financial resources, which is an ongoing struggle. When it comes to climate finance, we are too often relegated to the back of the queue. We must also address the critical issue of access to basic financial services. For nations like Nauru, equitable access to banking is not merely a convenience, it is a lifeline. Yet we face the growing threat of de-risking and the loss of correspondent banking relationships. This challenge transcends financial concerns. It strikes at the heart of our sovereignty and our dignity. Our nation's struggles cannot be measured by income alone. We are vulnerable in myriad ways, and the global financial system must evolve to reflect this complex reality. We are encouraged by the recent adoption of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, or the MVI, and we further call upon the World Bank, IMF, IFI, and MDBs to integrate the MVI into their frameworks. It is not just another statistic, it is a tool that provides a more accurate picture of our national circumstances, our strengths, our challenges, our potential. Mr. President, one of the most pressing issues of our time is the rising tensions between global powers. Nauru has long believed in the importance of maintaining good relations with all nations, great and small. We are friends to all and enemies to none, guided by our national motto, God's will first. Our restored diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China are a testament that even the largest and the smallest of countries can find common ground and work towards mutual benefit. Nauru is proud of our strong and growing relationship with China, and I take this opportunity to further commend their recent agreements with Japan on the ocean discharge of Fukushima nuclear contaminated water. This historic accord represents a significant step towards addressing a pressing issue of global concern. Mr. President, as a staunch friend, we continue to call for an immediate and unconditional end to the decades-long embargo imposed on Cuba. As we know, conflicts and tensions persist across many regions of the world. In our, in our shared pursuit of progress and prosperity, it is crucial to acknowledge that conflict impedes growth and undermines community stability. Therefore, we must intensify our efforts to foster peace and development free from the shadow of conflict. Let us reaffirm our commitment to building bridges of understanding, nurturing empathy, and promoting reconciliation. We must understand that peace and development are not separate entities, but intertwined pillars of human progress. Peace creates an environment where individuals can thrive, communities flourish, and nations prosper. In the absence of conflict, societies can better allocate resources to education, healthcare, infrastructure, and sustainable economic growth, fostering the advancement of all people. Let's work together towards a future where everyone can live with dignity, harmony, and opportunity, leaving behind a legacy of peace for generations. By prioritizing conflict resolution, we pave the way for resilience, progress, and shared prosperity. We must focus on building bridges, not walls, and work towards a more integrated, connected world. Inclusivity and engagement are vital as we strive for full economic and financial participation, ensuring that no country, large or small, regardless of its development status, is left behind. This is a call for collective action, a call we must all heed for the sake of our shared future. The UN Security Council reform, long overdue, must reflect the geopolitical realities of the 21st century. It is evident that the current structure of the UN Security Council has been a subject of debate, with legitimate concerns about representation, effectiveness, and the ability to address contemporary security issues. The imperative for peaceful resolutions and pursuing lasting peace in conflict-affected regions further underscores the critical need for a reformed and strengthened UN Security Council. Let us be the leaders who bring about a new era of peace and reconciliation. In our pursuit against climate change, we continue to call on the UNSG to appoint a special representative on climate and security. We are pleased to endorse the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and we urge countries to back this initiative for a sustainable and equitable future. And we also eagerly await the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on climate change, and will closely follow and support the implementation of the Court's guidance in the pursuit of climate justice. Nauru is pleased to welcome the Pact of the Future's ambition, yet we are disappointed in the removal of Action 21. My delegation, alongside members from the Group of Friends on Climate and Security, advocated for its inclusion to address the security threats posed by the climate crisis. Removal of Action 21 was a non-negotiable issue, and despite our flexibility to compromise, it is vital to stress the gravity of our decision. Mr. President, before I conclude, I call on the following. To the developed nations, we say, recognize your historical responsibility for emissions and honor your obligations under the Paris Agreement. Provide the climate finance and technology transfer you have promised. Support our efforts to transition to renewable energy, to enhance our climate resilience, and to protect our biodiversity. And to those who seek to block our efforts in sourcing renewable energy resources, do not dismiss the potential of deep-sea minerals outright. Do not ignore the science and the progress we have made. Instead, work with us to establish the robust regulations necessary for responsible mining. In line with this year's theme, we must accelerate our efforts without delay, because the climate crisis will not wait for us to get our acts together. To our fellow developing nations, we extend our hand in solidarity. Let us share knowledge, resources, and solutions. Let us amplify our collective voice, for in unity there is strength. And to the United Nations, we call upon you to fulfill your founding promise. Be a bastion of multilateralism, the resolute champion of the vulnerable, and the bold catalyst for the transformative change our world so desperately needs. Mr. President, I conclude my remarks by reminding us that leaving no one behind is not a mere platitude. It is a moral imperative. It is a call to action, a reminder that our fates are intertwined, and the advancement of all hinges on the advancement of the least among us. This is the vision enshrined in the United Nations Charter, and this is the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. Nauru may be small in size, but our resolve is immense. We will continue to fight for our homeland and our future generations. Let us act together with urgency, with ambition, and with the conviction that a better world is possible. May God bless the Republic of Nauru. May God bless the United Nations. Matubakar. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President and Head of State of the Republic of Nauru. We shall now continue for general debate. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Kashim Shettima, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, heads of delegation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, as you assume the leadership of this august assembly, our world is confronted by profound moral questions that will require more than the habitual remarks from this elevated podium to resolve. These are questions about the ultimate purpose of our organization, the United Nations itself, and how it can remain relevant and resilient. It is with this sentiment that I convey to you the warm and fraternal greetings of my countrymen and women, and to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency of this assembly. Let me assure you of the full cooperation of my delegation in discharging your honorable responsibilities during your tenure. In the same vein, I wish to extend my appreciation to your predecessor, His Excellency Dennis Francis, for the many remarkable achievements recorded during his stewardship. It gives me particular pleasure to commend His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his commitment to the cause of peace and development and the democratization of the United Nations to reflect the need to correct the historic injustice that has been done to Africa. I am also delighted to note the steadfast support given to the Secretary General by our own sister and compatriot, Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, while sharing the burden of leadership and responsibility in leading a complex organization like the United Nations. Mr. President, the theme of this year's General Assembly leaves us in no doubt that there is still work to be done to bridge the gap between the aspirations and the realities confronting our world today. It also underscores the need to remind ourselves that the United Nations stands for inclusiveness, anchored on the tripod of peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Today, these pillars of our organization are threatened. They risk being broken by the relentless pursuit of individual national priorities rather than the collective needs of the nations that are assembled here today. While commitment to multilateralism offers us the surest guarantee of global action to address the existential challenges we face, singularity and nationalism are undermining the aspirations towards a peaceful and collective resolution of such challenges. From last year's summit, and indeed from previous years, we have carried over the numerous challenges of terrorism, armed conflict, inequality, poverty, racial discrimination, human rights abuses, food crisis, hunger, irregular migration, piracy, global pandemics, hyperinflation, nuclear proliferation, grinding debt burden, climate change, and a host of other vexations. The continued manifestations of these challenges testifies to our failings rather than to any lofty achievements on our part. Billions of dollars are being committed to the prosecution of wars and the planning of the embers of conflict. Yet, we always recoil from bringing out the resources we need to build peace and to deliver life's necessities to people. The question of governance is at the heart of our problems and also the solution to them. We recognize this in Nigeria when on 12th June this year, we celebrated a quarter of a century of unbroken democratic rule. We are no less proud of this achievement than the fact that during the last 2 decades, a sustained process of democratization has swept over Africa. However, the return of unconstitutional changes of government and forceful military takeovers in some countries of the Sahel underscore the fragility of democracy when it is not backed by economic development and sustained peace and security. It is this fragility, rather than the milestone that democratic governance has achieved in Africa, that should matter most in our deliberations at this and other high-level segments of the 79th session of the General Assembly. While we are for all possible changes of government, we can also recognize the impatience in cities and villages as the sometimes slow and grinding turn of the wheel of democracy. Our people need employment. They need decent livelihoods. They desire good and affordable education and health care for their children and families. They need to live in healthy, safe, and secure environments. They need hope, and they need opportunity. They desire to live in peace and tranquility, to pursue whatever gives them happiness and contentment. When governments fail to deliver, the people are bound to question the utility of democracy and other ideals like rule of law. The global debt burden undermines the capacity of countries and governments to meet the needs of their citizens. Creeping trade barriers and protectionist policies are destroying the hopes for prosperity of peoples and nations. Unbridled competition, rather than cooperation, is discouraging incentives driving our investments. Above all, insecurity is driving people into unprecedented hardship and misery that in turn affect the people's confidence in democracy. It is the duty of the international community to bring back confidence in democratic rule and constitutional order by paying more attention to the needs and aspirations of the people, rather than paying lip service to human rights, sustainable development, and peace. We need the sustenance of democracy, not just the form. We cannot build durable societies with the threats of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency growing in our countries and regions. Indeed, violent extremism remains an existential threat to both national and international peace, security, and development. We are making concerted efforts to contain and roll back this threat. The high-level African counter-terrorism meeting hosted by Nigeria in April 2024 and its outcome, the Abuja Declaration, promises to provide solutions to the challenges presented by terrorists and insurgents. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a driver of insecurity, which also poses a veritable challenge to sustainable development. A few weeks ago, large areas of my country were inundated by seasonal flood waters, including one of our largest cities, Maiduguri, in the northeast. Other parts of Nigeria also experienced similar tragedies, occasioning the loss of lives and property. We need not remind ourselves to remain faithful to the implementation of the commitments that we all gave voluntarily at the various COP meetings. Failure to do so is merely to postpone the inevitable. No country is immune from the effects of climate change. It is better that we cooperate and collaborate to meet this ever-increasing challenge, rather than remaining in our shells, waiting for the inevitable to happen. A common challenge requires a common solution. Nigeria stands ready to meet our obligations in terms of mitigation and adaptation measures nationally and regionally, with the active participation of other countries and international partners. Mr. President, conflict resolution is the main reason why the UN exists, but the task of prevention becomes all the more difficult when conflict becomes normalized, when even the condemnation of violence and civilian casualties and calls for a ceasefire are somehow regarded as controversial. As we emphasize at the Abuja high-level ministerial meeting, we must renew our focus on conflict prevention. Indeed, Addressing the root causes of conflict is often the first step towards providing long-term solutions. Clearly, some of the root causes of conflict are social in nature, including poverty, hunger, ignorance, inequality, and exclusion, as well as other forms of injustice. In the Sudan, other parts of our continent and further afield, foreign actors are exacerbating these tensions to prolong conflict and deepen the suffering of innocent people. Today, we are all witnesses to the heart-wrenching situation in Gaza and other Palestinian territories. We cannot discuss war and peace, conflicts and resolution, or humanitarian imperatives today without reflecting on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has been raging since 7th August last year. Of course, the conflict predates this period and has been simmering for a better part of half a century. What this tells us is that the international community has failed to live up to the spirit and aspirations of the United Nations to rid the world of inequality, violence, and domination of one people by another. Justice is antithetical to revenge. Freedom is an inalienable right and a natural entitlement that cannot be denied to any people. The Palestinian people deserve their independence. They deserve to have a home of their own in territories already recognized by this very assembly and by international law, which is being routinely ignored. Nigeria continues to urge efforts to bring back on track the two-state solution that offers the prospect for a new beginning for the region. Nigeria reaffirms to supporting United Nations peacekeeping operations. We recognize the need for Africa to build strong and professional armies to meet the multiple challenges we face. Consequently, we reiterate the call for international support to operationalize the African Standby Force, in addition to the provision of requisite support and resources to ensure the upgrade, take-up, and effectiveness of a Center of Excellence on issues of counterterrorism in Africa. Mr. President, reform of the Security Council is critical if the UN is to strengthen its relevance and credibility in our rapidly changing world. Some permanent members of the United Nations Security Council have offered encouraging, if tentative, indications of support on the issue of reform of the Council. We welcome the change in tone and urge an acceleration in momentum to the process. The Security Council should be expanded in the permanent and non-permanent member categories to reflect the diversity and plurality of the world. We fully support the efforts of the Secretary General Guterres in this regard. Africa must be accorded the respect that it deserves in the Security Council. Our continent deserves a place in the permanent members category of the Security Council with the same rights and responsibilities as other permanent members. Mr. President, your assumption of the stewardship of the General Assembly presupposes that you will be seized with the progress of the implementation of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We note that most developing countries are significantly lagging behind in the achievement of these goals, largely due to a lack of resources available to finance their implementation and the burden of unsustainable external debt. It is our expectation that the adoption of the Pact of the Future for the Future will change the narrative, reposition economies, and translate into concrete measures that provide solutions to the challenges faced by developing and least developed countries. This is particularly significant in our region and the Sahel, where human development indices are low and depressing. It is for this reason that we reiterate the call by countries, especially of the Global South, for reform of the international financial architecture and promotion of a rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable, and transparent multilateral trading system. We are aware of the debilitating impacts of corruption on global prosperity and national progress. Process of corruption and illicit financial flows constitute a huge chunk of resources needed for sustainable development. The recovery and return of such funds to states of origin is a fundamental principle of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Therefore, the international community must promote practical measures to strengthen international cooperation to recover and return stolen assets and to eradicate safe havens that facilitate illicit flows of funds from developing countries to the developed economies. There is also the urgent need to promote fair and inclusive tax regimes in the world. Nigeria helped introduce the Resolution on Promotion of Inclusive and Effective International Tax Cooperation at the UN. We acknowledge the progress made in the adoption of the terms of reference of the UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. We should deepen this initiative and work towards a UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. Similarly, we must ensure that any reform of the international financial system includes comprehensive debt relief measures to enable sustainable financing for development. Countries of the Global South cannot make meaningful economic progress without special concessions and a review of their current debt burden. The present administration pays due regard to the imperatives of creating a conducive national environment for investment and the ease of doing business. Last year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed 4 executive orders to curb double taxation. The government also established the Presidential Task Force on review of fiscal policy and tax reform. These measures are geared towards not only boosting investor confidence in Nigeria, but also to ensure investors make reasonable profit from their investments. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while the world is transitioning into the 4th industrial revolution, Africa remains energy deficient. The push for the accelerated implementation of SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, therefore, must take into account Africa's precarious situation. Nigeria believes that natural gas remains central to the search for solutions to the energy challenges that Africa and the international community face. Access to affordable, reliable, cleaner sources of energy is more than an environmental or developmental issue. It is a key factor in social peace and international security. Mr. President, Nigeria remains unwavering in its commitment to SDG 13, climate action, including the net zero ambition and transition from fossil fuel energy to clean energy. As a demonstration of this commitment, the government established the Presidential Committee on Climate Action and Green Economy Solutions and appointed a special presidential envoy on climate action. We will redouble our efforts to address the challenges posed by climate change, including the urgent need to transition from fossil fuel energy. Yet, such commitments must be juxtaposed with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and the relevant provisions of the Paris Climate Agreement back in 2015. The Paris Agreement provided for developed countries to take the lead in the quest to achieve net zero and to offer support, including finance, to developing countries for the actualization of the climate change goal. Worthy of note is the loss and damage funding for vulnerable countries secured at COP27 in Egypt and expanded in COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. It is our expectation that this year's 79th session of the UN General Assembly and the upcoming COP29 in Azerbaijan this November will go a step further by providing developing countries, especially African countries, with access to the loss and damage funds, including the $100 billion pledged by developed countries to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. Mr. President, in this age of digital innovation, we must address the emerging divide between the Global South and the Global North, which, with the evolution of artificial intelligence, risks becoming wider still. The UN should work towards eliminating barriers to digital economy in Africa, such as high cost of internet services and intellectual property rights. More so, there is a need to work towards common global standards to regulate cryptocurrency trading platforms. This is the most effective way to provide confidence in these markets and limit the potential for instability. Our own experience in Nigeria, as in other countries, shows that new technologies, when not properly regulated, can facilitate organized crime, violent extremism, and human trafficking. In our own case, the trading of cryptocurrency helped fuel speculation and undermine macroeconomic reforms. Separately, we have also witnessed in rich and poor countries alike the corrosive impact of unfiltered hate speech and fake news across social media. There is much more that we could and should do together to strengthen those guardrails that will help release the most progressive elements of the new technologies shaping our world and curb those more destructive tendencies. Mr. President, we are particularly mindful of the imperatives of achieving the advancement of youth and women as a factor in national development, peace, and security. Nigeria has developed its own national action plan on women and security, as well as a national action plan on youth, peace, and security to ensure the participation of both women and youth in the peace and security sector. The Summit of the Future cannot be deemed successful without setting clear, ambitious, and achievable developmental goals to address the various challenges facing our youth. In line with this aspiration, the Nigerian government will continue to invest in Nigerian youth through initiatives like the revitalization of the National Youth Investment Fund for 2024, focused on youth employment and entrepreneurship. Mr. President, as much as the global family still grapples with the crippling consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the greatest lesson that we have learned is never again to take any health situation with levity. In line with SDG 3, we must continue to work together to ensure the good health and well-being of all. There is no disease that should be relegated to the background due to some perceived classification of their seriousness or importance. Mr. President, migration is a complex and polarizing issue that impacts on rich and poor countries alike. Nigeria is a country of origin, transit, and destination. We are a major stakeholder in the global migration dynamic and understand the challenges and benefits it brings. Accordingly, I wish to reiterate our support for the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, GCM. The GCM, which all of us should continue to support, represents our collective efforts at providing major safeguards for the treatment of migrants. Mr. President, I will conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's steadfast commitment to the deepening of multilateralism, just as we did 65 years ago on this podium when we joined the United Nations as the 99th member state. We remain committed to that desire to remain friendly with all nations and participate actively in the works of the United Nations, as expressed by our founding Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. It is my hope that our deliberations this year will result in solutions that will address our collective challenges and accelerate the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the advancement of peace and human dignity for the sake of present and future generations. I thank you all.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The Assembly will hear an address by His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain. I request protocol to escort His Royal Highness and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful.
And Excellencies, Your Excellency, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Secretary General Guterres, It is my honor to be here today and to convey to you the greetings and best wishes of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. And I would like to begin by offering my congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your election as President of the 79th session of the General Assembly. I wish you every success in guiding this important work. I also extend my deep appreciation to His Excellency the Secretary General for his tireless efforts in advancing the noble objectives of this organization across the globe. Mr. President, 8 decades ago, at the dawn of the nuclear age, humanity found itself engulfed in a devastating war, fraught with peril and uncertainty. The world was in desperate need of order and a system of accountability and governance. The United Nations was created to become a pillar of stability, a vital institution the world relied on to prevent unspeakable atrocities from ever happening again. Whether through the formation and application of international law, the promotion of diplomatic consensus, the investment in development programs, or the deployment of peacekeeping missions, the United Nations and its specialized agencies have together stood firm to reflect the spirit of global civic responsibility. The number of world leaders participating in this year's General Assembly is a testament to that enduring spirit. 19 years ago, I had the honor of standing here and addressing this historic hall, where I touched on the pressing challenges confronting our world at the time: poverty, famine, deadly infectious diseases, civil wars, and weapons of mass destruction. These global challenges not only persist, but have intensified. We find ourselves in a far more dangerous and unpredictable time due to major tectonic shifts in the global geopolitical order. In addition, revolutionary new technologies have emerged that will fundamentally reshape the world as we know it. Environmental and health challenges that know no borders have also multiplied and grown in complexity, requiring us all to work together regardless of our differences. Mr. President, the very systems designed to uphold the international order are under strain. 80 years after its formation, as the threats and challenges we collectively face evolve, this important institution, which our global community relies on to safeguard the international rules-based order, must evolve as well. Today, we support the calls for reform of the United Nations to ensure that it reflects current geopolitical realities so that it is equipped to continue carrying out its important global mandate for decades to come. This reform should be holistic, consensus-driven, and encompass all the decision-making bodies of the United Nations, including the UN Security Council. The peace dividend that followed the end of the Cold War is now a distant memory. Today, we stand on the precipice of a new era with new challenges, and we must recommit to peace as the bedrock on which we build collective prosperity and enduring hope for all. For as we all know, it is far easier to destroy than it is to build. Today, we see governments disregarding the established rules-based order as they pursue policies rooted exclusively in self-interest. We see a preference for brinksmanship and the use of questionably legal force to resolve disputes. We see the rise of radicalism, extremism, and rogue non-state actors sowing chaos and discord. In Gaza, we see Palestinians living through an unprecedented humanitarian disaster, with over 40,000 people killed, many of them women and children. The protection of innocent life is enshrined in international law and a moral and religious responsibility. It is clear what is required is the implementation of an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and the adoption of an irrevocable path to the creation of a viable, independent Palestinian state. And it must happen now. This will achieve a comprehensive and lasting peace, deliver the security and prosperity to all nations in our region, and prevent the spread of a wider regional conflict. In the West, we witness widespread suffering as the intractable conflict in Ukraine persists. In the East, we see tensions continuing to rise in the South China Sea, raising grave concerns of wider military escalation and the further erosion of the integrity of the international rules-based order. The tolls of these conflicts are borne by humanity, by families, by communities, and by our future generations. These conflicts undermine growth, stifle opportunity, and endanger the hopes we hold for our children. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain has long been a vocal advocate of pluralism and multiculturalism. It's who we are. In August of this year, and in line with His Majesty King Hamad's vision that mutual respect for our shared humanity is essential for sustaining global harmony, Bahrain launched the King Hamad Award for Peaceful Coexistence. His Majesty the King has also called on the international community to convene an international peace conference on the Middle East. As current holder of the Arab League presidency, the Kingdom of Bahrain urges all nations to join us in this vital initiative, which seeks to strengthen efforts to achieve a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace in the region. Diplomacy and dialogue must prevail. Indiscriminate violence, conflict, and fragmentation will only drive us further from this noble goal. Mr. President, in the Kingdom of Bahrain, we have committed ourselves to ensuring that our citizens are at the core of all our national development programs. We have worked tirelessly to ensure that they are equipped with the skills necessary to deliver prosperity and growth to themselves and their community. As we look to the future, we will spare no effort to provide our citizens with opportunities to connect with the wider world, to compete, innovate, and succeed. We prioritize the issues that unite us all: housing, healthcare, education, and delivering jobs and prosperity. We focused our government ministries and agencies on a set of priorities, reached out to the private sector, civil society, and wove together a spirit of one team focused on delivering those programs. Mr. President, today's world is, in many ways, more fragile than the one that had emerged from World War II. This is because the global challenges today go beyond geopolitical conflict. We are seeing the devastating impacts of unsustainable development on the world's environment. And as a result of conflicts and fragmentation, we have seen a rise and a return of global hunger. We have also witnessed firsthand the alarming effects of diseases such as COVID-19, which showed how quickly the global order can be disrupted. These crises must not be treated in isolation. They are interconnected, and they represent a systemic threat to humanity. It is imperative that like-minded countries come together with the objective of revitalizing, adapting, and renewing our institutions to effectively address today's significant challenges, and to effectively deliver on the ambitious commitments set by the United Nations SDGs and the recently adopted Pact for the Future. This can only be achieved through a system-wide reform that encompasses pivotal multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Health Organization, as well as the United Nations. The international rules-based order is not sustained by hopes or dreams. It is the product of robust international institutions and security constructs that are fit for purpose. Mr. President, as a member state of the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Arab League, and the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Kingdom of Bahrain has always been committed to the path of multilateralism. We hold firmly to the belief that working alongside allies and in accordance with the rules of international law is the surest way of guaranteeing our long-term prosperity. This is also why, in 2023, the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United States of America concluded a historic agreement to forge a new model for security and shared prosperity. The Comprehensive Security and Integration and Prosperity Agreement is designed not as a bilateral arrangement, but as the beginning of a multilateral framework that aims to bring together countries with an equal interest in delivering stability and prosperity. It is a model for how nations can promote an inclusive vision grounded in mutual respect and shared goals. Partnerships such as these can go beyond the geopolitical dimension and enter the world of emerging technologies as well. Through meaningful international collaboration, we can harness the transformative potential of technologies such as artificial intelligence to advance shared goals of global development, peace, prosperity. Doing so will require a united global front, though. And today, we call for an international treaty governing the development of artificial intelligence to ensure that these technologies contribute to peace rather than exacerbate existing conflicts, and that they become forces for creation and innovation, not destruction and division. The Kingdom of Bahrain believes that engaging in wide-ranging partnerships such as these will be crucial to advancing the cause of multilateralism and ensuring that cooperation becomes a cornerstone of our collective security frameworks. Through such agreements, we are confident that the Middle East and the global community can build a future rooted in peace, economic growth, and a rules-based international order that benefits all people. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, the challenges we face today are not insurmountable if we act with a collective will and the determination to define a revitalized international architecture built on shared values and a renewed commitment to multilateralism that prioritizes the well-being of all nations. Some issues are just too important not to rise above our differences. Let us together reaffirm our shared responsibility to uphold and protect human dignity and ensure that the international order remains a force for good. We owe this to future generations, to the values we cherish, and to the world we seek to protect. Learning to live together is indeed the noblest of endeavors. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni, President of the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Italy. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The times we are living are very complex, and the common characteristics of the challenges of these times force us to think about things in a completely different way. The wound caused to the international framework founded on rules from the war of aggression of Russia on Ukraine is indeed having destabilizing effects well beyond the borders within which it is unfolding. And like a domino, it is contributing to reigniting or causing to explode other flashpoints of crisis. Democratic political systems are facing unprecedented dangers. Geoeconomic fragmentation is growing, bearing down consequences we must all deal with, especially the more fragile nations. The path toward a reduction in environmental emissions is at a crossroad in between ideological approaches and scarce solidarity, especially from the major emitters of greenhouse gases. The scarcity of water and energy have an ever deeper impact on development, on food security, and the social stability of entire communities. The instrumental use of religious faith has become a source of tensions or worse, of persecution. There are hundreds of millions of people throughout the world that suffer due to their profession of faith. And at the top, as victims, there are Christians. We are witnessing the groundbreaking advent of generative artificial intelligence, a revolution that brings us to ask questions we could never imagine, although I'm not certain it is correct to call it intelligence, because the intelligent being is the one who asks the questions, not the one to give answers through data processing. Either way, it's a technology that, unlike all the innovations we've seen through the course of history, sets a blueprint for a world in which progress is no longer meant to optimize human capacities, but to replace them, with consequences that risk being dramatic, especially in the labor market, verticalizing and concentrating wealth even more. It is not by chance that Italy wanted this to be at the top of its agenda of its G7 presidency, because we want to do our part in defining a global governance for artificial intelligence capable of reconciling innovation, rights, labor, intellectual property, freedom of expression, democracy. This complexity, compounded by profoundly interconnected challenges, tells us first and foremost one thing: the problems of the global South are also the problems of the global North, and vice versa. There are no longer homogeneous blocks, and the interdependence of our destinies is a fact. For this reason, we are called to think differently from the past. The challenge is to make a firm paradigm shift in our relations among nations and in the functioning of multilateral organisms. The goal is to build a model of cooperation that is completely new. I personally believe that this new model can and must be based on a few, unfortunately not granted, principles, that is, mutual respect, fellowship, and concreteness. It means to have a rapport with one another on an equal footing, to recover that ability to listen to others, to understand their thinking, which is the basis for any form of mutual trust. Precisely because we believe in this approach, Italy set all of its events for its year holding the G7 presidency in an open format, with a very broad outreach involving all continents, the G20, the African Union, the financial and economic institutions, and the multilateral development banks. We have shown that the G7 is not an armored fortress that wants to fend off anyone, rather an offering of values open to the world. I think of the turning point Italy has reached in its relations with Africa. We have made operative at the bilateral level our investment plan for Africa, the MATE plan, with pilot projects in 9 African countries, creating strategic partnerships with each. We structured operative synergies with the European Union's Global Gateway and the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment of the G7. We built new financial instruments with the African Bank for Development and the World Bank to allow for a flow of public and private resources. We devised innovative solutions such as the Apulia Food Security Initiative to strengthen food production and food security, and the Energy for Growth in Africa to support the production and distribution of clean energy. We have decided to support strategic projects for Africa, such as the Lobito Corridor. We have done all of this without ever ceasing to involve and exchange inputs with our African interlocutors. We intend not to impose, but to share, and together choose priorities, sectors of intervention, areas of action. Where we could be an added value, we offered our perspective and our cooperation with projects that are already giving results. In Algeria, we will render fertile 36,000 hectares of desert land for crop cultivation and build a local facility for processing and production. In Kenya, with the development of a biofuel plant that will be completed by the end of 2025 and will sustain up to 200,000 small farming enterprises. In Ethiopia, with a large environmental recovery plan on the area of the Boy Lake in the west of the country. Because I want to reiterate this once again, our objective, before tens of thousands of people who face desperate journeys to enter Europe illegally is to first guarantee their right to not have to emigrate and to not have to cut their ties with their homeland simply because they have no other choice. It's a desperation on which reckless criminal organizations that are more and more powerful and ramified profit. I proposed a year ago from this podium to declare a global war against human traffickers, and I am happy to see that that appeal did not fall on deaf ears. First, in the G7, we found an agreement that gave life to an agreement, coordination to dismantle criminal networks. The United Nations must do more, however, because these criminal organizations are reproposing themselves under other forms. For example, slavery, understood as the commercialization of the human being, that this assembly in other times had a fundamental role in ridding the world of this definitively. We are not turning back to the past. Defeating the slave trade of the third millennium is possible, and we can do so if we join forces with greater cooperation and joint initiatives among our police forces, intelligence services, judicial authorities in adopting the formula, follow the money. This was an intuition of great Italian judges, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, that became a model even at the international level to combat criminal organizations. It is a method that Italy intends to use to strengthen its cooperation with Latin America, because there's a common denominator that ties organizations that profit on human trafficking in Africa and those who manage narco trafficking in Latin America, or the abominable act of abducting children to render them sex slaves of rich men, depriving them of their present and their future. In America Latina, where unfortunately, as it happens in other regions of the world, its legitimate aspirations of freedom and democracy, that of tens of millions of people, continue to be unfulfilled. I'm thinking in particular of the Venezuelan people, to which we give our full solidarity and support. The international community cannot just stand there and watch, as already after 2 months since the elections on the 28th of July, the election results have not been recognized. And at the same time, there's been a brutal repression, the death of tens of protesters, the arbitrary arrest of thousands of political opponents, the incrimination and banishing of the presidential candidate of the opposition. It is our duty to raise our voices. Dear friends, in 2025, we will be celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Charter of the United Nations, the charter that enshrines the principles and values that at this time have been put into question by none other than a permanent member of the Security Council, but whose defense we will not back down, because these are principles and values that are made for all as a guarantee, especially countries that are less equipped to defend themselves. No one is above the law, but this is needed even more to defend the more vulnerable. And for this reason, we cannot turn our backs in front of the right of Ukraine to defend its borders, its sovereignty, its freedom, as we affirm the right of the State of Israel to defend itself from external attacks like the attack of the 7th of October. At the same time, we ask Israel to respect international law, protecting civilian populations. It too a victim of Hamas and of its destructive choices. And following the same reasoning, we believe obviously in the right of the Palestinian people to their own state. But for this to happen, we need Palestinians to entrust it to a leadership that is inspired by dialogue, by stabilizing the Middle East, and autonomy. The Abraham Accords have shown the possibility of an advantageous coexistence and cooperation on the basis of mutual recognition. If this is the basis on which we all have to work, and it is, today the imperative is to reach without further delay a ceasefire in Gaza and the immediate release of Israeli hostages. We cannot witness any longer tragedies like we've seen in these days in the south and east of Lebanon with the involvement of helpless civilians, many of which children. That said, the anniversary next year gives us a historic opportunity to be finally aware, whether we like it or not, that the problems that we have involve all of us. And we must be able to question ourselves with humility and awareness. And this imposes also a serious reflection about multilateralism, on the capacity of international organizations to be up to task in this era to the challenges that we're facing. I'm talking about the United Nations and its capacity to reform, starting with what is useful and necessary and not from what is easier. Italy firmly believes that whatever reform of the architecture and the functioning of the United Nations, starting with the Security Council, cannot go without considering the principles of equality, democracy, and representativeness. It would be a mistake to create new hierarchies with new permanent seats. We are open to discuss the reform without prejudice, but we want a reform that serves to represent everyone better, not to represent better only a few. Colleagues, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's a difficult time, the one we have been called in to govern our nations. And around this, we see all changes. Everything is put into question. The very few certainties we thought we had are no longer the same. Destiny is challenging us, but in the end, it is doing that to put us to the test. In the storm, we can show to be up to task in the work that we have to do. We can show citizens that we govern and show our children. We can show ourselves, probably ourselves even more importantly, as a great Italian patriot, Carlo Pisacane, the protagonist of the Risorgimento, said, compensation, every compensation will be found at the bottom of my conscience. We have to face problems instead of push them and kicking the can down, to look at what is important, what is useful. This is our duty. It's hard. It's a hard task, but it's necessary. And Italy, as always, is ready to do its part. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Italy. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Aziz Akhannouch, Head of Government of the Kingdom of Morocco. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahi ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, President of the Assembly General, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to begin by congratulating Mr. Philemon Young upon his election to the helm of the 79th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I wish him every success in his mandate. I also wish to thank your predecessor, Mr. Dennis Francis, for his efforts at the head of the previous session. I should like to take this opportunity to affirm the total support of the Kingdom of Morocco to the initiatives and the efforts of Mr. Guterres to allow our organization to tackle global challenges, and in particular his initiatives on the Summit of the Future. Mr. President, every year we come together here and we face rapid, complex developments in the international context which we discuss. This transformation is fast. We have seen technological advances which have been very significant, especially in artificial intelligence. course, this aligns with the needs of our societies and the challenges that we face. The sense of collective security with regard to the very creation of the United Nations has given way to uncertainty now in many areas. These include the challenges that have to do with consumption, production, governance, and the very structure of our societies. This is what King Mohammed VI said, may God assist him, in the meeting of the World Bank and the IMF in Marrakesh. I have quoted the gist of what he said. Our planet faces climate change, which has imposed a new reality. In this context, data has shown that the problems that we are confronting should be overcome through multilateral organizations, those organizations that were created in the wake of World War II. End of quote. What we're asking ourselves today is, has multilateralism run up against its limit today? Do we need to to choose between multilateral action and the values and the principles that bring us together, the ideals, our ideals? Mr. President, the diplomatic doctrine of the Kingdom of Morocco is multilateral in its core. We focus on the ambition, clarity, and realism. We do this in order to achieve cooperation with our historic partners, a partnership that allows us to set up the necessary framework on the basis of effective solidarity and the sharing of experience. The goal of this being to tackle security and development challenges at the same time. The Kingdom of Morocco does not look for any short-term political opportunism. However, given our sense of realism, we need to travel the same path in order to confront the same challenges and the same threats. Now, it is not possible today to focus only on the failures of multilateral action. We also cannot content ourselves with merely declaring good intentions. We need new momentum. We need new reform to which all segments, all strata of society, including women and young people, can contribute. In the wake of the Summit of the Future, we need to bring on board all of these groups. In order to implement a comprehensive multilateral program. This is what developing countries need, including what they need is for us to bring our experience to bear for their benefit. Climate change, Mr. President, is among the greatest challenges that our planet faces. This is why there is a need to support the states of Africa. These states are most affected by the results and the consequences of climate change, while these states are very minor contributors to pollution, which causes climate change. We also need to be aware of the problem of debt. We need to take into consideration the constraints imposed on African states when it comes to climate change adaptation. This is why we call for the creation of financing mechanisms that are innovative in order to allow for a resolution of debt crises, we also need to reform the international financial architecture. This in order to help developing countries achieve financing that allows for their economies to recover. These countries should also contribute to multilateral development banks, and these institutions must become more democratic in order to address debt crises more effectively. Indeed, such crises have a major impact on African countries' economies. This is why the Kingdom of Morocco, which chairs the group of middle-income countries, reiterates its call for multilateral actions to be taken, actions aiming to preserve the economic momentum that has been accumulated by these countries. Mr. President, in keeping with the vision of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, Morocco calls for pragmatic, realistic multilateralism to serve the needs of the African continent. This through effective mechanisms as regards decision-making. This is the approach of the Kingdom of Morocco. And this is why the government of Morocco has applied this approach in various areas. These areas include climate change and combating terrorism, inter alia. We work to implement social justice through structural workshops, which we have provided major resources to. Millions of people can benefit from direct social aid through this push. Mr. President, Morocco has turned toward the Atlantic. This is why we want to make the Sahel region an economically integrated area, a truly continental region. This is why King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, has worked to bolster collaboration between African countries through the Atlantic Initiative for the Sahel. This initiative is in keeping with the cooperation between countries of the South and aims to show solidarity to make the Atlantic and African area an area of peace, stability, and development. Furthermore, His Majesty launched an ambitious initiative, an initiative that aims to facilitate the access of Sahel countries to the Atlantic, buoyed by the conviction that these countries have the right to participate in the global economy. This initiative is a pillar for development, peace, and prosperity in this part of the African continent. Furthermore, building on this same solidarity, we have worked to create an agreement linking Nigeria and Morocco in order to ensure regional economic integration, to promote the development of the Atlantic coast with 13 African states. The wisdom of our leaders and innovation that has been shown by our young people has allowed us to move forward, and we need further international solidarity in order to tackle all the challenges that we face. The Kingdom of Morocco is staunchly committed to the peaceful resolution of conflicts. We have thus been working in order to achieve a peaceful solution to the issue of Moroccan Sahara, and this on the basis of the Morocco Autonomy Initiative in the context of Moroccan sovereignty, which will allow for the development of this region. Indeed, we will continue, and we've seen the support from many countries to this autonomy plan. That sends a clear message to the states and to the United Nations. Indeed, it is time to act. It is time to put in place a political solution on this basis through the various roundtables that have been organized and in keeping with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council as well. We support the efforts of the Secretary General of the United Nations and those of his special envoy to relaunch the political roundtables with the participation of the 4 parties concerned in order to achieve a realistic, sustainable political solution based on consensus and based on the relevant Security Council resolution. His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, has told the Secretary General that there can be no political process outside of these roundtables. The parameters of these roundtables have been set out by the United Nations with comprehensive participation by Algeria as well. No solution other than this Morocco autonomy plan can happen. No political process without a ceasefire of the armed militias is possible. This was recalled by the members of the Security Council as well. Thus, the lived reality in Moroccan Sahara is reflected in unprecedented development in Morocco through the projects we put in place through our new development plan for the provinces of the south. This region has benefited from comprehensive assistance through people that are democratically elected through local councils at all levels and at all areas of political decision making. So this has contributed to the political, social, and economic life of Morocco. This shows the territorial integrity of Moroccan Sahara and the fact that it belongs to Morocco. Mr. President, His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, during his statement at the 25th anniversary of his accession to the throne, recalled the tragedy lived by the Palestinian people, which is a brotherly people. So we join various other Muslim and Arab countries in expressing our extreme concern at the serious situation that is affecting the occupied Palestinian territory. Since the end of 2023, millions of civilians, millions of victims, mainly civilians, women and children, have fallen victim to this aggression against Gaza, which is a blatant violation of international law and of all human values. His Majesty King Mohammed VI called for setting aside the logic of crisis management to arrange for a sustainable solution that can put an end to the war in Gaza. This is an absolute priority. At the same time, we need a new political horizon, a horizon that allows us to reach a fair, lasting peace in the region. Second, the negotiation of a peace process between the Palestinian parties and the Israeli parties requires combating the extremist tendencies on both sides. Thirdly, the stability of the region is linked with the two-state solution. In the context of this solution, Gaza must be an integral part of Palestinian territory, a Palestinian state that must have East Jerusalem as its capital. In this regard, His Majesty King Mohammed VI, as a chair of the Al-Quds Committee in the Islamic Organization for Cooperation, called for the delivery of food and medical aid to our brothers in Gaza. The Kingdom of Morocco expresses its profound concern as regards the recent developments in the Middle East. Indeed, this situation is unprecedented, and it is leading toward an extension of the regime, which could lead to consequences that are difficult to anticipate. His Majesty King Mohammed VI clarified that the lack of a political horizon in the context of the Palestinian question is one of the most major factors in the resolution of this conflict in the Middle East. His Majesty has repeatedly warned that there could be serious consequences due to this lack of a political horizon. And he said that this could bring about a genuine tragedy, which could have serious consequences for peace and stability in the Middle East. This could also impact international peace and security. I wish here to express the total solidarity of the Kingdom of Morocco with the brotherly country of Lebanon, which is experiencing genuine aggression. We respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. President, there are numerous global challenges that face us today. This is why we need to appeal to our collective conscience. We need to rethink our working methods. We need to rethink our fundamental values. We need to return to our fundamental values. Indeed, the United Nations has collective responsibility, which should encourage us to return to our values of humanity, the humanity that underpinned the very inception of this organization. Thus, reform is needed as we approach the 80th anniversary of the creation of our organization. The Social Summit to be held in 2025, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, these are all a vision and a roadmap for the work and for collective action to be done in order to avoid further delays in development. I thank you, and may the peace of God be upon you.
I wish to thank the head of government of the Kingdom of Morocco, The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Alexander De Croo, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as leaders from around the world flock to the UN this week, they should only have one ambition: find a way out of the conflicts in Sudan, the Middle East, Ukraine, and all too many other places. These conflicts are close to our homes and cities, bringing war and famine and terrible tragedies to families and societies. When we take a brief look back in time, history teaches us a lesson. Just after Andrei Sakharov had developed the first Soviet hydrogen bomb in 1955, the nuclear arms race and Soviet doctrine seriously troubled him, because he saw that human rights and human dignity were an absolute necessity, a precondition, not just for nuclear security, but for prevention of war. The fight for human rights defined him and turned him into an international advocate, culminating in the Nobel Peace Prize 20 years later. In its remarks, the Nobel Committee noted that Sakharov fought against the abuse of power and all forms of violation of human dignity. Looking at the world today, it is crucial to remember Sakharov's legacy. Across the globe, human dignity and the rule of law are receding, and in many cases, they are absent. And where the respect for human life and the promise of rule of law fades, armed conflict loom large. History might not repeat itself but it surely rhymes. In the Middle East, decades of dehumanizing enemy has led to a vicious cycle of violence, resulting in the killing of over 40,000 people in less than a year. This man-made conflict has proven one of the deadliest in decades. And this conflict didn't start with a horrific terrorist attack against Israel, killing over 1,400 Israeli citizens almost a year ago. But on the 7th of October, Belgium immediately acknowledged Israel's right to defend itself, and we called for the unconditional release of all hostages. Early on in the Gaza war, my government warned against the lack of respect for international humanitarian law on both sides, and the disproportionate attack with the blatant disregard for Palestinian civilian life. Almost 1 year later, we must sadly acknowledge that the extremes on both sides still set the tone of this conflict. Fanatics believe that military power can end this conflict. This is a delusion. To achieve peace, we need a proper roadmap, political courage, not mere tactics to remain in power another day. We have been calling for an immediate and lasting ceasefire for many months, but today it seems more distant than ever. Hostilities need to stop before the whole region becomes engulfed in violence. Action speaks louder than words. Belgium has imposed a weapons embargo. We never ceased our support to UNRWA and other humanitarian organizations. Together with the EU, we have imposed sanctions on Hamas, but also on extremist settlers and settler organizations. For every innocent life lost in Gaza and every discovery of a dead hostage, the prospect of future peace may seem more distant than ever. Today, Gaza lies in rubble. Over 15,000 people need prosthetics because of lost limbs. 10,000 of these victims are children. Where is human dignity in all of this? However, there is a way out. I'm convinced that it starts with the recognition of the right to exist of both Israel and Palestine based on the 1967 borders. We should all engage with Palestinian and Israeli leaders who recognize these rights and who oppose both anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinian feelings. Only then we can start articulating a viable pathway for a two-state solution. Mr. President, dear colleagues, Vladimir Putin has been waging war in Europe for more than 2 years now. And there is one simple truth. He can stop the illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine right now. His madness continues to have devastating consequences for the Ukrainian people. One man alone can stop the killing of thousands of civilians, can end the continuous violence against Ukrainians whose future has been put on hold. Only he can end the shelling, end the bombing, the indiscriminate attacks on bridges, on roads, on energy infrastructure, on hospitals, on schools, and on people's houses. Widespread and disturbing brutality has been established by various independent international inquiries. None of us can and should look away. Over the past year, the Belgian-Ukraine Fund spent 1.7 billion euros on military equipment, humanitarian aid, and on the reconstruction of Ukraine's hardest-hit regions. Belgium's Development Agency is helping Ukraine's recovery and is preparing for joining the European Union. The people of Ukraine will be battling against another cold winter soon. That is why we are winterizing energy provision in hundreds of hospitals. Over the past 2 years, we have often pronounced the words, "for as long as it takes." We do not take this promise lightly. As the Russians continue to bomb cities, Ukraine's call for more air defense is pure self-protection. How else can they keep their citizens safe? The buildup of a strong Ukraine F-16 force is an integral part of our support. We will transfer all of our fighter jets when they leave the Belgian Air Force. The total amounts to at least 30 over the coming years. We want to help protect the people of Ukraine. The aggressor shall not win. And it is why our support for Ukraine stands strong. To all of you who aspire for peace, it will only come about when we force President Putin to stop his aggression against Ukraine. Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that we are living in a polarized and deeply divided world. This observation could lead us to believe that multilateralism has failed on all fronts. That would be a mistake. A year ago, a treaty that protects biodiversity on the high seas was adopted. This collective initiative proves that it is still possible to unite to tackle the climate and environmental emergency. The global response to Mpox and the reaction of the African CDC to the epidemic are yet another example of progress. The European Union and Belgium have invested significantly in vaccine manufacturing and access in Africa. We require more solidarity and cooperation, and these words may seem idealistic and naive. However, we can only overcome common challenges by working together. The world over, extreme weather events are increasing. Just last week, heavy rainfall caused flooding across vast swathes of Central and Eastern Europe. Our planet and all forms of life that live on it face colossal challenges. Now, however, is not the time to despair and to scale back our ambitions. On the contrary, human ingenuity, sustainable competition, and changing of deeply entrenched behaviour can mitigate the effects of climate change and help us to adapt. We have ramped up our efforts to further scale up our ambitions for the climate and for the oceans. We stand ready to work with our partners, in particular in the most vulnerable African countries, by providing them with financing and by providing them capacity building. This autumn, the COP on biodiversity in Cali and the COP on the climate in Baku will be yet more key moments for the future of the populations and the planet.
In all those years, talk about conflict prevention, peace building, and peacekeeping has multiplied. Unfortunately, this has not stopped conflicts from becoming more numerous, deadly, and enduring. The number of aid workers killed has reached record highs. Number of refugees continue to rise year after year. Our common humanity seems to be in a deep crisis. Which brings me back to the lessons of Andrei Sakharov, which he taught us. Where human rights and human dignity are absent, conflicts loom large, and the most vulnerable bear the brunt. A new beginning, with the Pact for the Future, calls for, and must therefore start with our recommitment to the UN Charter, to the rule of law, and to the respect for human dignity. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium. We have heard the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting. We will continue the general debate tomorrow at 9 o'clock a.m. in the hall. The meeting is adjourned.